I noticed something change in my mother-in-law's face the moment she realized I wasn't who she thought I was. Not her expression exactly, she kept smiling, but something behind her eyes shifted, like a door closing quietly in a house you thought was open. That moment came later in the evening, after the wine had been poured and the salmon had gone cold on the plates. Before that, I was just the woman her son had brought home for Thanksgiving dinner, wearing a gray blazer and carrying a bottle of Pinot Gris from the Okanagan. My partner had always known I worked in medicine. That part was never a secret. I went to the hospital most mornings. I talked about long shifts, difficult cases, paperwork that never ended. I just never mentioned what I actually did there. Not once in the 2 years we had been together. He knew I was a doctor. He assumed I meant the kind who sees patients in a walk-in clinic, refills prescriptions, sends referrals. He never asked beyond that, and I never corrected the picture he had quietly painted. It wasn't dishonesty, it was relief. In my field, your title arrives before you do. Conversations realign. People become careful or they become distant. Some treat you like a resource. Some become intimidated in a way that curdles into resentment. A very few stay exactly the same. I had spent the better part of my 30s being spoken to as a designation rather than a person. When I met my partner at a hiking trail near Squamish on a rainy Saturday in October, he didn't know any of that. We talked about the trail conditions, about a novel we had both read, about the specific shade of green that only exists in BC forests after rainfall. He asked for my number because he liked talking to me, not because of anything I represented. By the time things became serious, it felt too late to introduce a correction. Not because I was hiding something shameful, but because the version of me he knew, the one who burned toast on Sunday mornings and had opinions about transit planning and got irrationally competitive at board games, felt truer than the version that appeared in hospital corridors with a team behind her. I wanted to find out if someone could love the first version before they ever met the second. When he invited me to his parents' place in Kelowna for Thanksgiving, I said yes without hesitating. "They're going to like you," he told me. "They're pretty traditional. Old school, but warm." I smiled and said that sounded fine. What I didn't say was that I was curious. Not about whether they would like me. I already knew how to be liked. I was curious about who they were when they thought I was unremarkable. His parents lived in a house on a quiet street near the lake. Well-kept garden, a Canadian flag above the garage, the kind of neighborhood where people still wave at each other from driveways. His mother opened the door before we rang the bell. She had clearly been watching for the car. She hugged him first, then turned to me with a warm, rehearsed smile, the smile you give the girlfriend you're not sure about yet. His father appeared behind her, tall and deliberate, the kind of man who had opinions about handshakes. He shook mine firmly. "So you're in medicine," he said. Not a question. My partner had clearly mentioned it. "Yes," I said. His father nodded once. "What kind?" "I work at Vancouver General," I said. "Surgical." He tilted his head slightly. "Assisting, or?" I smiled. "Something like that." That was the moment the room made its first quiet decision about me. Inside, the house smelled like roast turkey and the particular warmth of a home that has hosted many holidays. Family photos lined the hallway, his parents at what looked like their 25th anniversary, my partner in a hockey jersey around age 12, his older sister at her university graduation, cap and gown, broad smile. I studied them for a moment. There were no photos of anyone I didn't recognize. We sat in the living room while dinner finished. His mother brought out a cheese board and asked about the drive up from Vancouver. His sister arrived 20 minutes later with her husband, who sold commercial real estate and had the energy of someone who considered every room a potential networking opportunity. His brother-in-law asked me what I did within the first 3 minutes of meeting me, listened to my answer, then moved on. His sister was warmer, genuinely curious, but distracted by her toddler, who had decided the cheese board was a personal project. Dinner was served at the long dining table that had clearly been in the family for decades, scratched in the right places, solid, comfortable. His mother had cooked everything herself, which I found genuinely impressive. His father said grace short, specific, the prayer of someone who believes, but doesn't perform it. Then the questions began. His father wanted to know about my family. Where were they from? What did my father do? I told him honestly my parents had immigrated from South Korea in the 90s. My father had worked in manufacturing in Burnaby for 20 years. My mother had been an ESL instructor at a community college. His father nodded. "Good, honest work," he said. I agreed that it was. His mother asked if I planned to stay in Vancouver long term. It's an expensive city, she said, lowering her voice slightly, as though the city might overhear and take offense. For someone just starting out in a career, it must be difficult. I said I managed. She smiled sympathetically. Have you thought about moving somewhere smaller? Kelowna's come a long way. Even Kamloops. Much more affordable for young professionals. I said I hadn't thought about it. She moved on to the next topic without pausing his sister's new house in West Kelowna, which had gone up in value substantially since they bought it 3 years ago. Good investment, his father said approvingly. His brother-in-law agreed loudly. The conversation turned toward square footage and interest rates, and I ate quietly and listened. At one point, his father turned back to me. Do you rent, he asked, or? I own, I said. He raised an eyebrow. In Vancouver? Yes. His mother and father exchanged a brief look. Not unkind, just recalibrating. His sister, to her credit, asked me something genuine then. She wanted to know what the hours were like in surgical, whether it was as intense as it looked on television. I told her honestly yes, sometimes more so, and she listened with real interest for a moment before her toddler knocked a glass of water across the table, and the conversation dissolved into paper towels and apologies. Later, while his mother was clearing plates and his father and brother-in-law had migrated to the living room to talk hockey, my partner went to help with dishes. I stayed at the table with his sister while the toddler slept against her shoulder. She looked at me carefully. He really likes you, she said. I smiled. I really like him. She nodded. Then she said, quietly, not unkindly, he's not very ambitious. I hope that's okay. He's a good person, but our parents always thought he'd do more with his degree. I said I thought he was doing exactly what he was supposed to be doing. She seemed to consider that. What about you, she asked. Do you have plans? Bigger things? I said I was fairly settled. She nodded again, in a way that suggested she wasn't sure whether to believe me or feel sorry for me. It was his father who pushed the conversation in the direction that changed everything. He had come back to the table with dessert butter tarts, which his mother made from scratch, and which were genuinely the best I had eaten in years. He sat across from me, relaxed now after 2 glasses of wine, and looked at me with the direct, benevolent authority of a man who considered himself a fair judge of people. So, he said, tell me, honestly, what are your ambitions? I looked at him. In what sense? Career, he said. You're what, early 30s? Now's the time to be building something real. Surgical assisting is fine, but it doesn't exactly go anywhere. Have you thought about going back to school? Administration, maybe? Healthcare management. I held his gaze for a moment. I have a PhD, I said, and a fellowship in cardiothoracic surgery. He blinked. I'm the surgical department head at VGH, I added. Have been for the last 3 years. The table went quiet in a way that is difficult to describe. Not silent, there was still the muffled sound of dishes from the kitchen, the hockey recap on low volume in the living room, but the space around us became very still. His father looked at me. He looked at me the way people look at something they have been speaking about incorrectly for the last hour, and have only just realized it. My partner appeared in the doorway from the kitchen, holding a dish towel. He caught the expression on his father's face and looked at me. I met his eyes. He read the room in about 2 seconds. You're, he said. Yes, I said. He sat down slowly. His mother came out from the kitchen and felt the shift immediately. She looked at her husband, then at me. What did I miss? She asked. His father cleared his throat. He looked like a man who was deciding something internally, something that required quiet and effort. She's the head of surgery, he said, at Vancouver General. His mother's expression moved through several stages very quickly. Then she sat down. His sister, to her credit, laughed. Not cruelly. A short, genuine laugh of surprise. I like her, she said to no one in particular. My partner hadn't said anything yet. He was watching me with an expression I hadn't seen before. Not hurt, not angry. Something more complicated. Something that looked like he was trying to understand what, exactly, had been true this whole time, and what it meant. I'm sorry, his mother said first. I think we may have, she paused. We assumed. I know, I said. I didn't mind. She shook her head. That's not an excuse. His father cleared his throat again. He looked like he wanted to say several things and was deciding which one to lead with. He settled on, Why didn't you tell us? I thought about the question. Because I wanted to see who you were before you knew, I said. The silence that followed was heavier than before. It's not a test, I added. I've been in rooms where my title does all the talking. I wanted one evening without it. No one responded immediately. His father looked at the table. His mother looked at her hands. His sister looked at me with an expression that was difficult to read, partly sympathetic, partly like she was impressed and didn't want to show it. My partner finally spoke. He said my name. Just my name. And then, I didn't know. I know, I said. I wasn't hiding it from you. I was protecting something else. He nodded slowly. He didn't fully understand yet. I could see that. But he was trying. Dessert was finished quietly. His father asked me a few careful questions about the hospital carefully now, formally, as though he was in an interview rather than his own dining room. His mother refilled my tea without asking. His brother-in-law, who had returned from the living room, asked if I knew a cardiologist he had once seen at Lion's Gate. I said I didn't, but I could find out. Everything was polite. Everything was correct. And that was exactly the problem. In the car on the way back to the hotel, my partner didn't turn on music. He drove in silence for several minutes, and I let him. "Are you angry with me?" he finally asked. "No," I said. "Are you disappointed?" I thought about it. In the evening? Yes. In you, not exactly. He frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means the dinner answered what I came to find out," I said. And the answer was complicated. He was quiet for another kilometer. Then he said, "My dad asked you about going back to school." "Yes." My mom suggested Kamloops. "Yes." He exhaled. They weren't trying to be rude. "I know that," I said. "That's the part I keep thinking about." He looked at me briefly. "What part?" "That they were being perfectly nice," I said. "They were warm and polite and they made excellent butter tarts. And they still spent the first 2 hours assuming I needed career advice and a cheaper city." He didn't respond to that. "I'm not angry at them," I said. "I just learned something about the defaults people carry, the assumptions that run quietly in the background without anyone choosing them." He nodded slowly. He looked like he was absorbing something uncomfortable. "Did I do it too?" he asked. "Assume things." I looked at him. "What do you think?" He didn't answer. That silence was its own answer. The hotel room was quiet. I sat at the small desk near the window while he got ready for bed, looking out at the dark water of the lake, the few lights still on across the shore. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even particularly sad. I felt something closer to clarity, the specific kind that comes from watching something confirm what you already half suspected. The next morning, his mother called my partner before we had even checked out. She wanted us to come for breakfast. She had made cinnamon rolls from scratch, she said. "Please come." We went. The house felt different in the morning, quieter. His father was already at the kitchen table when we arrived, reading the paper, and he stood up when I walked in, not dramatically, just with a kind of deliberate courtesy that had not been there the night before. His mother poured coffee immediately, into the good mugs, the ones she had clearly kept at the back of the cabinet. "I want to apologize properly," she said, sitting across from me. "Not for anything obvious. For the assumptions. For the way I spoke to you about," she waved a hand, "Kamloops." I smiled. "You made very good butter tarts." She laughed, a little awkwardly, and shook her head. "That's kind." She looked at me seriously. "I think I have a habit of fitting people into categories before I've actually seen them. I'm not sure when that started." I said that was probably true of most people. His father set down the paper. "I want to say something," he said, "and I want to say it plainly." He looked at me. "I misjudged you last night. Not intentionally, but I did. And I think if you had been," he paused, "someone without your background, without your degree, without the position, I would have continued misjudging you." He paused again. "That says something about me that I don't particularly like." I held his gaze. I appreciated that he said it directly. Most people didn't. "Awareness is something," I said. He nodded. "It's a start," he agreed. "It's not enough, but it's a start." My partner was quiet through most of breakfast. He ate his cinnamon roll and watched his parents carefully, like someone watching a film he hadn't expected to find meaningful. On the drive back to Vancouver, he was quiet again for a long time. The highway stretched out through the dry hills east of Hope, the light flat and gray with October cloud. "Can I ask you something?" he said eventually. "Of course." "Would you have told me?" "Eventually?" I considered the question honestly. "Yes," I said. "When it felt right." "When would that have been?" "I don't know exactly. When I was sure it wouldn't change things." He nodded. "Would it have?" Changed things? I looked at him. Has it? He thought about that for a long moment. I don't think it changes how I feel about you, he said carefully. But I think it changes how I feel about myself. A little. That's not a bad thing, I said. He smiled faintly. Doesn't feel great. I know. But the fact that you're saying it out loud matters. We drove in silence for a while. Rain started, the particular soft kind that settles in the Fraser Valley in autumn without any drama. My dad asked me this morning, he said, before you came down. He said he wanted to know if I felt like I was out of my depth. And what did you say? He glanced at me sideways. I said I thought everyone feels out of their depth sometimes, that it doesn't mean you don't belong. I looked at him. Where did that come from? He shrugged. I don't know. Somewhere honest. That was the first time since the dinner that I felt something settle inside me. Not everything, but something. The weeks after Thanksgiving were quiet in the way that matters. My partner and I didn't have a dramatic reckoning. We had small, honest conversations, the kind you have while cooking or walking or sitting in separate corners of the same room. He asked questions about my work that he hadn't asked before, not out of awe, but out of genuine curiosity. He came to meet me outside the hospital one evening and stood in the entrance for a moment, watching people move through the corridor. And later he said, I think I understand now why you wanted a version of things without all this. His mother sent a text the following week, just a short one, said she had been thinking, that she hoped I knew she found me interesting as a person, not as a title. She signed it with her name, not Mark's mom, which she had always done before. I wrote back and told her I knew. I believed her, with the understanding that belief and proof are different things, and that proof takes time. His father called once to ask about a cardiac issue one of his friends was dealing with, whether a second opinion was worth pursuing. I gave him what information I could, and referred him to a colleague. At the end of the call, he said, Thank you for not making me feel foolish for asking. I said he wasn't foolish for asking. He was just learning who to ask. There was a long pause. Then he said, That's a very careful way to say something. I smiled. I've had practice. The harder conversation came from my partner, a month later, on a rainy Sunday in our apartment. He had been quieter than usual all morning, the kind of quiet that accumulates. He finally set down his coffee and said, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. I said I would. He said, When you were testing your parents watching how they treated someone they thought was unremarkable, were you also testing me? I didn't answer immediately. The honest answer, I said finally, was yes. A little, not deliberately, but yes. He nodded. He didn't look hurt. He looked like someone who had already suspected this, and needed to hear it confirmed. And what did I do, he asked. I thought about the 2 years, about the times he had introduced me without elaboration, about the times he had let other people talk over me and moved on, about the times he had seemed proud of me for reasons I couldn't fully identify, reasons that might have had more to do with how things looked than with who I was. You were kind, I said. You were genuinely kind. That counted for more than you know. But, he said, because he heard the space after it. But sometimes I wondered if you had made a category for me too, I said. A quiet one. Not unkind. Just fixed. He was silent for a long time. I think you're right, he said finally. I think I saw you as someone I'd found unexpectedly. Someone good and steady. But I think part of me thought I understood the shape of your life. And when the shape turned out to be different than I thought, he didn't finish the sentence. It scared you, I said. Yes. He looked at me. Not because of what you are, because of what it meant about what I'd missed. That was the most honest thing he had said to me in months. And the most honest thing I could say back was, I miss things too. I kept myself smaller than I needed to. That wasn't fair to either of us. He reached across and took my hand. I don't want to be with you because of your title, he said. I want you to know that. I was with you before I knew. And I'd be with you even if none of it were true. I know, I said. But I also want to actually know you, he said. All of it, not just the version that felt safe to show me. I looked at him. That's what I've been waiting for someone to say. We didn't fix everything that morning. Some things take longer than a conversation, but something real shifted not in how we looked at each other, but in how much of ourselves we brought to the looking. His parents came to visit Vancouver in March. His mother wanted to see the cherry blossoms along West 16th, which she had seen in a photograph online, and declared she had to experience before she died, though she delivered this with enough humor that it was clearly not urgent. His father wanted sushi, specifically omakase, which my partner found both surprising and somehow appropriate. We walked along the seawall on the Saturday morning. His mother linked her arm through mine at one point, the way women do when they've decided to actually know each other. She talked about when she had first moved to Kelowna from Ontario, how disoriented she had felt, how long it had taken to feel like the place was hers. I told her my parents had felt that way for years after arriving in Burnaby, that the ground takes time to feel solid when you come from somewhere else. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I think I assumed your life had been smoother than it was, because of where you ended up." "People always assume that," I said. She shook her head. "It's lazy." I smiled. "It's human." She looked at me sideways. "You're very patient with us." I said, "I'm patient with the things that come from not knowing, less patient with the things that come from not wanting to know." She understood that, I could tell. His father walked beside my partner a few meters ahead, talking about something I couldn't hear. At one point, his father put a hand briefly on my partner's shoulder, the particular gesture of a father making peace with something, or beginning to. That evening, over dinner at a small restaurant near the waterfront, his father raised his glass. "I want to say something," he announced, in the way of men who have rehearsed. "To my son, for finding someone worth being uncomfortable around. And to you," he looked at me, "for not making it easier than it needed to be." It was an imperfect toast, but it was honest. I raised my glass. The truth is, I had walked into that Thanksgiving dinner looking for information. Not revenge, not vindication. Just the kind of information you can only gather when no one is performing for your benefit. And I had found it. Not all of it was flattering. Some of it was difficult to hold. But all of it was real, and real is what I had come for. I had spent a long time in rooms where my title arrived ahead of me. Rooms where I was spoken to as though the position and the person were the same thing. I had spent equal time trying to exist as something smaller than what I was, hoping to find something uncomplicated. What I had found instead was something better and harder, a relationship that had to become honest about itself before it could become anything lasting. There is a thing people do, I do it too. I've learned where they decide who someone is before the evidence is in. Not out of cruelty, but out of efficiency. The mind makes its first draft fast, and then defends it. Revision is slower and uncomfortable, and requires admitting that the first draft was wrong. The question I came to Kelowna to ask was not really about his parents. It was about what happens to the people around you when they think you have nothing to offer. That answer, it turns out, tells you almost everything you need to know. And what remains after the title has been removed, after the credential has been set aside, after the room has gone quiet is either something worth staying for, or a clarity you couldn't have gotten any other way. I found both. I'm still deciding what to do with them. If this story made you think about the assumptions you carry, the ones you didn't choose, the ones you've never had reason to examine, I'd ask you to sit with that for a moment. Not with guilt, just with honesty. Because the most important thing I learned isn't about rank or achievement or being underestimated. It's simpler than that. It's this. Pay attention to how people treat a person before they know what that person is worth. That's the version of them that's true. And that's the version you'll be living with long after the first impression is gone. If that resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you believe quiet strength and honest stories still matter, we'd love to have you stay.